wasn't Patrick on the end. Sheila, sit here, we'll go down in order. There we go. That work? We're kind of ad-libbing this. We were the unplanned lunch guests here. So forgive us if we haven't compared notes, so there might be a little overlap here. I'm Diane Derby. I'm with Senator Leahy's office. I had the good fortune of being down here at Jim Baker's request last fall, I think it was, and Jim gave me the whirlwind tour of Arlington, and we discussed a lot of these same issues back then. So I do have a little bit of a sense of the land here, and it's a great place. So thank you, first of all, for inviting us all here today. I think it's really beneficial for the whole delegation and the state to have a sense of what you're talking about here and chime in on how we might help. And I'll just say the energy in the room is really great. You have great leadership, and it's really an important function to make all of this come together. It's really, listening to the wastewater discussion too, it's, we came to discuss housing, but it's clear that there's so much more than just housing. And I think one thing we can all talk about are the various ways that federal funding can help. So let me just quickly kick off with a big overview, if I might, with the federal funding. Senator Leahy's vice chair of the Appropriations Committee and fought a hard fight to keep the funding going for the kinds of programs that fund the Shire's projects, the affordable housing and community development. And just last month, the whole delegation announced $20 million to the state of Vermont to support these kinds of projects. And that's real money, and that's money that we're always fighting because there are efforts in DC to eliminate that funding, and it's critical funding for rural towns. So that's a lot of what we do is work to connect the federal funds that come into Vermont with the communities that need that funding. The Shire's project, I think, just received a CBDG grant announced this week, I believe, for their project here. And on the wastewater front, Town of Bolton just received a CBDG grant for $1 million to help them with their wastewater issues. So these are the kinds of funds. CBDG, Housing Trust Fund, Home Fund, and NeighborWorks. Is Ludy still here? Great work that they all do. And the delegation works hard in DC to promote it, to make sure that these funds are passed from the federal to the state and local partnerships. And Vermont's very fortunate to have really good, strong local nonprofits that work in every county around the state to make sure these funds reach the needed projects. So those are the key elements of the kinds of federal funds that come in. But I'll just say again, the wastewater treatment, there's clean water, there's revolving loan funds, there's a whole bunch of federal grants that touch on everything you're talking about here today. So I think it's great we're having this initial discussion, and I think the delegation is really happy to work with everyone involved in figuring out how to match this up. I did hear early on that there's a plan to hire a town administrator. I will say the one piece of critical consideration there, when you consider to hire, have some grant writing capabilities, have some ability to go after these federal funds, because it can be way too intimidating, way too daunting of a task to go after federal funds for the select board. It's just that it's a lot, and as a result, a lot of smaller areas aren't necessarily getting their piece of the pie, so to speak, compared to some of the areas that have really great grant writers who know how to go after the federal funding. I had a great discussion with Kate when I visited the health center about the federal funding that comes in to support the work they're doing, and it's in ways you don't even see that federal funding reaches your community. But the key, it's all competitive funding. We just don't have the ability, we used to at one time when there were those dreaded earmarks, to go in and say, here's $250,000 for that project. Now it's all by competitive grants. So that said, when you're thinking of a town administrator, it would be really helpful for your sake to consider who can write the grant projects. I won't go on. I'll just say I'm from Montpelier, which 30 years ago when I first moved there was a sleepy little town. Nothing, and on a different scale, but we have the same issue. We're a town of 8,000 people, 30,000 during the day because we've got state government. Your Mac Molding is our state government. Everybody leaves, and it used to be that the town just went to sleep at 6 o'clock at night, and now it's a very vibrant downtown community in the evening, largely because of arts. And it's just a changed community over years, and it's been largely a private-public partnership. But I was just talking to the select board chair about, the identity politics. What does Arlington want to be? Do you want to be a sleepy, quiet little town? Do you want to be a vibrant community that brings back a lot of those tourists that you once had? And I think that's a great starting point for where you're at right now. So I'm sorry I've talked too long. I'm just going to leave some business cards somewhere on the back table for myself and for Polly Major, who's actually our housing specialist in the office. I'm not unique to the housing world. So I will leave cards, and please feel free to reach out to any of our offices. Sheila Reed from Senator Sanders.
Hi, everybody. Ditto what she said. I am not a housing policy expert. I am the senator's housing outreach person. I go out, I'm his eyes and ears. I came here today to learn, and I've learned a whole lot, so I really appreciate it. I don't need to tell you about a lot of the funding streams, the Shires is right over there. There's lots of experts in this room that can deal with that. I guess I just want to say, I have been all over the state of Vermont on housing issues. And we have a severe and protracted housing crisis in Vermont. It is not just you. It is the entire state. And it has been going on for 30 years. We have a lot of work to do in the area of housing, finance, and development. And that being said, we have an amazing housing finance community and development community, affordable housing finance and development community in this state. I'm looking again at Shires, but there are these, and they're partners. The housing conservation person, you're there? No, right there. The partners are amazing. Ludi over there. There's a lot of great work going on. And there also is a lot of federal money out there, just like Diane said. I also have my cards. We can get you lists of grants. We have those. We have links to where you can apply. One of the big things, for example, is the entire state of Vermont has become a rural development. They're called REAP zones. That I covered the Northeast Kingdom, especially for the senator. That was just in the Northeast Kingdom until recently. The Northern Borders Commission. There is a lot of money out there for a lot of things. And I wish I had brought our economic development and energy person today, because it seems to me that you've got a lot of those issues going. So, community development block grants, that's so much money there. The Farm Bill, you'll be eligible for grants from the Northern Borders, as I said. There's lots going on, lots you can do. And the most inspiring thing to me is that this community group is sitting in this room talking. And you have a very bright future as far as I'm concerned. Thank you. And I also have brochures from Senator Sander for people, if you have individual issues with housing, or any of your people do, you can call these numbers and we work on those too. Thank you.
Hi everybody, my name is Elizabeth Morris. I work for Congressman Peter Welch in his Burlington office. I just want to thank you all for inviting the three of us here. I think we were all really happy to hear that this discussion was happening and for us to be able to come and listen. I know that Sheila said that she was the eyes and ears for Senator Sanders, so that's how all of the delegation's district staff is. We are here to listen when our bosses can't, since they have to be in DC so much. And make sure that they know what's going on. So I want to thank you guys for bringing this to our attention. And I know that my counterparts discussed a lot of and mentioned a lot of the grants that are available, like community development block grants, et cetera. And I can give you guys a little update about what's going on in DC in the House for funding wise for that. I know that there's always concerns about things being cut continuously. There has been some movement in the House Appropriations Committee. Just yesterday, they passed the THEAD, that's the Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development, in the Appropriations Committee, and that was a total of 50.1 billion for HUD, which is about 5.9 billion above the 2019 enacted level. I know those numbers might kind of just be broad and overreaching, but that money goes down and through to programs like NeighborWorks and such throughout the state. Obviously, there's an uphill battle after the House regarding that money, but a lot of DC knows about the issues that are going on. And Congressman Welch, he hears a lot when he goes around the state, issues that aren't just rural Vermont, they're rural America, which means that he feels that he can really work with his counterparts in DC on those issues, like broadband that are impacting your housing or issues of infrastructure. These aren't issues that are just in Vermont. I had someone come up to me and say, are we alone in this? You're not, but not just within the state, also within the nation. So he really feels like he can work with his Republican counterparts where he may not agree on many, many other issues, but they can agree on things like this. So he does have some hope for infrastructure packages and such that would be able to help towns and help them with things in addition to wastewater, also road issues, et cetera, that can impact the towns that he visits and sees every day. There are a couple of other things I do want to mention. Congressman Welch views young professionals as an incredibly important part of our state. They are the future. So one of my biggest parts in his office is young professional outreach. So I was really happy to meet Alec earlier today and chat about Arlington young professionals. And he knows that their movement into our state is really vital for us, for our schools, but also it's really hard for them in smaller towns where they love to shop, they vacation here, and they see the amazing recreational benefits and the community and the schools, the fantastic schools that you can't get in other areas of our nation, and they want to move here. But it's hard, especially when they might have a job that they need broadband out of their homes, and that's not accessible all the way throughout the state. And he hears that a lot, so I just want to make sure you guys are all aware that he knows, and he's doing everything he can in DC. I will be around this afternoon. I'll have some cards. If you guys have specific questions about those grants that my counterparts mentioned, we're happy to chat. Kind of the way that we always see things is, instead of just saying, let's get the money and then see what we can do with it, come up with your idea and then go from there and see what would work. So we're here, all of us. We'll have our cards in the back, and please feel free to grab us with any other questions, and Congressman Welch is with you. So, thank you.
Good afternoon, I'm Patrick Scheld. I'm here from the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. I know that the governor himself was invited to attend. Wasn't able to make it, but knowing the priority and the seriousness of the conversation, he passed it on down to our agency, on to Josh Hanford, the current commissioner. I'm actually a little upset. Katie wasn't able to make it because I haven't seen her since January, but certainly understand the circumstances that surround that. And unfortunately, Josh wasn't able to make it because currently, which is actually something that I think is kind of relevant to what you guys are doing here. Right now in Montpelier, they're hosting the annual Downtown and Historic Preservation Conference. It just so happens to be in Montpelier, but it also happens to be it's either the 40th or 50th anniversary of the Downtown Designation program that's run out of the Department of Housing and Community Development. So unfortunately, Josh already had commitments to that to be there. But a lot of what they do and highlight through that conference is the idea of placemaking and making your downtown a vibrant place to attract people to come. I know there's been a little bit of discussion about how Route 7 had created a little bit of a bypass. Well, part of what the idea behind placemaking is to create those attractions, to pull people off of Route 7 and that bypass and get them to come down 7A. So that's a quick introduction. I did prepare a couple remarks. I just want to make sure I run through them super quick because there are some things in here that I think have already kind of been discussed, but points I wanted to make as well. One thing I do want to say is thank you for the plug for CDBG. That's mainly what I do with the Department of Housing and Community Development with the Vermont Community Development Program. We administer the state CDBG funds. So you might be asking, what is CDBG? Well, it's basically the idea behind it is to provide decent housing, suitable living environments, and expand economic opportunities, with the primary beneficiaries of those projects being low, moderate income individuals. You don't have to figure out who qualifies for that. That's my job, so you guys should pick up the phone, give me a call, and we'll talk about what the specific project you have in mind. Basically, it comes down to housing projects, public facilities around community centers, child care centers, co-working spaces, helping businesses expand or new businesses start for job creation. And we will fund all of those. We will also fund infrastructure projects as well. And so I know that's been a little bit of a hot topic. So I just want to say, as the governor has stated, one of his priorities is housing for all. And so what's that mean? It's to provide safe, adequate, physically accessible, and affordable housing for all Vermonters of all income levels. Here in Vermont, we have one of the oldest housing stocks in the country, and it's just getting older. Homes are getting more inefficient, and they're in need of more repairs. And repairs are costly, so much so that sometimes, as you guys have been talking about, it's better to just abandon a building or let it fall into so much disrepair and then leave the property altogether. Or tear down and build new. So the answer in some ways is kind of twofold. We need to preserve what we currently have so it doesn't fall into disrepair and become unlivable, while simultaneously also building new to add more housing options to the communities. So it's a little bit of both, and it's certainly a challenge. A couple of things I just wanted to mention to kind of keep in mind, things that we're working on at the Department of Housing and Community Development, things that will start to trickle down here into the community and around the state. One of the barriers to housing and just development in general is the capacity of local infrastructure, as you guys have been discussing with the wastewater. Having that capacity within a centralized location like the downtown is going to create opportunities for businesses for new housing. I could go on, but I think I hit that point this morning. So that's one thing that we have noticed. It's something that we're currently working on and trying to create toolkits to assist rural communities on how to address some of those infrastructure capacity issues to allow for this infill development in your downtown areas to help create that vibrancy. Another barrier to think about is town zoning laws, and I know they were mentioned a little bit earlier, but these can sometimes be possible impediments to even fair housing that may exist and unintended consequences of some local zoning laws. I personally am not an expert on zoning, but my colleagues at DHCD are, and that's one of the things that they are currently working on. In fact, the program Community Revitalization and Planning, CPNR, if you guys are familiar, they're currently working with an outside consultant to develop a template of housing-friendly zoning laws that would, hopefully at the end of it, they can basically just hand to communities that can be adopted with no additional changes. And the idea of it being to create those more friendly zoning opportunities like I think we've briefly discussed, where you might have an area for business zoning or an area for housing zoning, but if you could combine those maybe to allow for the building of commercial on the first floor and housing on the second, third floor. So that's something that we're working on at the Department of Housing and Community Development. And then just a final barrier that I've seen that I think is pretty unique, and I haven't seen it very often in many towns around the state, but it's the idea of creating a fund within the town budget that can act as match funding. So a lot of these grant programs that we speak about and that are available require some form of match. I know with the Vermont Community Development Program and the CDBG grants, all of our grants require now a 10% match. For some of the larger housing projects, matching 10% is not going to be an issue. But for some of the smaller grants, we also offer planning grants and feasibility studies and engineering studies and pre-development for housing. Those now set at $60,000 cap maximum award amount, but we're dropping the match down to 10% to make them more accessible to communities throughout the entire state. But having that set aside within your town budget, it might prevent a bond vote in the future for a specific project, because you know that you already have this small amount, and it doesn't need to be large, because like I said, ours is only 10% of 60,000, you just need $6,000. And having that set aside just makes you shovel ready, is a phrase that we use a lot. It just shows that the money's there, the budget's there, there's a municipal contribution, so there's municipal buy-in immediately, and we know that it's a priority of the town because they're putting their money forward, and it creates just another avenue to access some of these grant funds, because it'll provide that little cushion so the town can then go out and start looking at do some of these feasibility studies and not have to scramble to find those matching funds that they already exist. And then, one of the last things I just want to mention is all of you guys here in the room. I mean, as it's been said, this is an issue that's statewide, it's nationwide, but seeing a group come together the way you guys have today is uncommon. This isn't what is normal. So having this, and I love the fact that right on the agenda, and as Jim mentioned at the very beginning, that the whole goal of this is to create action steps. We can plan, we can go back and revisit that plan, we can do another study, and we can study it again. But it's the action steps that come out of meetings like this that really progress things forward. So I commend you all for giving up your day and coming here and gathering and discussing these challenging issues. I'm happy to answer further questions after the fact in the afternoon, hand out my card as well, and talk about maybe how Vermont Community Development Program and Department of Housing and Community Development can support all the efforts that are going on here in Arlington.
Patrick, and before Jim gives us the hook, I just want to make a plug for Polly Major in our office who handles housing. He used to work at USDA, Department of Agriculture, Rural Development, and she asked me to put in the plugs for the home loan program that USDA RD puts together. Guaranteed loan targeting mid-income range, connects people and resources. I brought a whole bunch of these to hand out, and I'll also leave them on the back table. But USDA RD has an office right in Montpelier, right on the same floor we're on in the federal building. And it's not a well-known program, sadly enough, and they're always in search of new potential clients. So it's a really easy way for people at middle income to secure low rate financing.
You're right. What I really don't understand is, you were saying the problem's been here for 30 years. I
didn't say that. That was Sheila.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm down that side. Why is there a problem if there's so much money available, so many agencies available? What's the common thing that's preventing the housing crisis to get resolved?
And that's the question of the applicants. I mean, there's a lot of people who do not have the funds to purchase. We talked about it. Or a large percent of their income goes to, huge percent of their income goes to rent. We do not have great income levels in this state. We don't have the kind of high-paying jobs that are going to allow for people to automatically go in and purchase a home when they start their careers. I mean, there's a lot of, social and financial issues out there keeping people from becoming homeowners. And that's just one of the things we're working on. And I should say really fast too, Kevin, who isn't left, I guess, he was extremely modest about his very innovative Healthy Homes program in the Bennington Hospital. I heard him give a presentation in Lebanon. I am now telling every hospital administrator I know that, and they were pioneers in this. And I think they bought about 5 to 8 homes at the present time, completely rehabbed them, and made sure they were affordable for new employees and young families in Bennington. So he should be really proud of that. He barely mentioned it.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll just real quick is I think some of it is also the unknown. You know, a lot of these federal grant programs, I mean, I don't even know the names of all of them, but I know that they're there, and it's knowing who to ask the right question to. For instance, you know, some of these homes that people are talking about that you need to purchase and then need to repair. I mean, I don't know if you guys are aware, but Moody out of NeighborWorks Western Vermont runs a phenomenal program out of their home ownership center to help single-family homeowners address some of these repair issues. And, you know, possibly could be coupled with the purchase of a home, followed right in line with a very favorable loan for a low-income family that could then repair their home. So I think part of it is also that these programs are available, but we don't just walk out into a community and say, this is what you need to do. It needs to come from within. It needs to come from the local, the grassroots, and knowing where to ask those questions. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say, as one thing Josh Hanford wanted me to mention, is that at the Department of Housing and Community Development, we are accessible. We each have our own personal phone line sitting on our desk. We each have email. Pick it up, call us. Not only myself from our community development program, but Sean Gilpin, the housing specialist, community planning revitalization. And if we don't have that grant opportunity, we'll help you find where you can get it. So it's asking the right questions to the right people.
I think to the point, though, of why we're spending more money at the federal level, perhaps. We're bringing in more money, spending more money. Because income has been very stagnant. And I am 60 years old, and I bought a house for $98,000 in Montpelier 25 years ago. And I could afford that. And now anyone under the age of 40 cannot buy a house in Montpelier. It's the harsh reality. So it falls more to federal help to help people become homeowners. And it's not unique to Vermont. It's across the board nationally. But I hear Ally's point. You know, people who are 26 years old cannot think about affording a home in Montpelier anymore. And I just downsized and moved to a community of small homes in Montpelier, and I'm surrounded by young kids. And I can tell you there's going to be an explosion in school rates in 5 years, because I have 3 kids in every house under the age of 6 living all around me, and they're small, affordable homes in Montpelier, and that's, I think that's the answer. But I think we're out of time. We're all available for
I get to be the boogeyman.
I don't want to go against him.
Thank you.
Thank you.